Has anybody done any hiking up in the White Mountains? And again, okay, so I think the reason why I asked that is just for comparison purposes, what you can expect on the Milford Track should you go compared to the White Mountains, and also the Routeburn Track. In general, it's a lot easier than hiking, say, the Presidentials. So it puts a standard there, so what you would know what to expect. So I did the Milford Track about 5 years ago, actually. So and Betty Ann Ryder kindly invited me to give this talk. She was looking for substrate of exotic places around the world, and she knew I had done this with a friend of mine. As a lot of you know who've obviously been to New Zealand, it's a pretty long ways away. So this map sort of puts it in perspective of how to get there. So you have to fly from Los Angeles or San Francisco across the Pacific Ocean. It's about a 14-hour flight. It's a long ways to go. And often people go to Australia at the same time. So if you happen to be in Australia and want to go to New Zealand, it's about a 3-hour flight. In fact, when I went there, we were in Australia, and we popped over to New Zealand for about 10 days to do these hikes I'm going to be talking about. And so a little bit about New Zealand and the geography. There are two major islands, the North Island and the South Island. And it's way down south. You see, the 45 degrees south line is just there. So you're talking about somewhere equivalent to maybe Quebec or Labrador or something like that. So it's pretty far south in the Pacific Ocean, and therefore it can be pretty cold. And it's also very maritime. It's in the middle of the ocean, so it can be wet and cold there. But the hiking season there is during the summer, which makes sense because the winter time is probably not a good time or a dangerous time to hike down there. And the area where the Milford and the Routeburn Track is in a place called Fiordland National Park, which is in the extreme southwest of New Zealand on the South Island. This is a very, very wet area, actually. They have about 200 wet days a year, and they get up to about 25 feet of rain a year. So you have to be a little bit lucky in terms of getting totally good weather when you're down there. I gotta say, we were very fortunate. So the South Island is geologically quite different from the North Island. The South Island is very mountainous with sort of high, precipitous mountains like the Rockies. And the North Island is more volcanic, has, volcanoes, like Japan, like Mount Fuji. I haven't actually traveled much on the North Island, but I have been to the South Island 3 times. And the last time I went there was when I did this hike. So usually when you fly to if you want to get to the South Island and to Fiordland, you typically would land in Auckland, which is on the North Island. It's the biggest city in New Zealand. And then you will take a flight down to Queenstown on the South Island, which is the sort of springboard for doing lots of different activities, outdoorsy activities on the South Island. This is a bit of a blow-up of the Fiordland National Park. And the point I want to make with this slide is you can see all these indentations. It's extremely mountainous, lots of lakes and deep fjords, this very jagged coastline. And one of the most famous places in New Zealand is Milford Sound there on the top, which is a deep fjord and very popular place to go. It's also very isolated, actually. There's not a lot of big towns. Queenstown is the major town in the area, but it still is not very big. This is just an overview of the Milford Track and this, what it constitutes. As I mentioned, it's only open during the summer months, and of course it's the southern hemisphere, so it's November to April is the season for hiking in New Zealand. The track is and I should say it's called the Milford Track. It's really the Milford Trail, if you can, you convert that to American. So it's not like it's a track with tractors and, vehicles or anything like that. So it's a 4-day hike, 3 nights, and you spend on the guided walk, you get an extra night at the end before you get back to Queenstown. It's a total of about 34 miles, and it's only hiked one way from Lake Tieno up to Milford Sound, and it's highly regulated. They only allow 40 guided hikers per day, and it's only, you can only access the trail from a lake by a boat, so it's easy to control it. And the other interesting thing is the advancement along the trail is compulsory. So you can't stop and spend a few days in one place. They make you move every single day. And in fact, if there's bad weather or something else comes up, they'll bring in helicopters to bring one group up to the next hut. So it's compulsory advancement. Fortunately for us, we didn't have to take the helicopter. I wouldn't have liked that very much. And there are optional side hikes, including Sutherland Falls, which I have some pictures of, which is New Zealand's highest waterfall. For the guided walk, there are private huts, and it's run by a company called Ultimate Hikes New Zealand. And these are very nice, as you'll see some of the pictures of the huts. I call it yuppie hiking. It's, it was, I've hiked in the White Mountains and stayed in the huts there, which are a little bit rustic, but this is, pretty nice, and relatively speaking. And all meals are included if you take the guided walk. And so this map, this diagram at the bottom shows this sort of layout of the hike. Day one is just a short boat ride and then a short walk to the first hut. And then it's spaced out a 10-mile hike the second day. Then the third day is 9 miles, but you go over a mountain pass. So this is where you do some climbing and then going back down again. So the first day is pretty level. The second day is up and down. And the fourth day is pretty level as well, as you'll see. So you can also do the Milford Track as an independent walker, but again, it's highly regulated. They only allow 50 independent hikers a day to go on the trail. And again, it's only during the season. Again, only one way. So you never see people coming the other way, which is kind of nice. Again, compulsory advancement, you got to keep moving. The huts there are huts provided for independent walkers, but it's more like the huts up in the White Mountains. You bring your own stuff, you cook your own meals and that kind of thing. And there's no camping allowed, so it's highly regulated. It's less regulated on the off season, so you can, if you want to risk it, they remove a lot of the bridges. There's lots of bridges, you'll see those pictures. And there's always the danger of avalanche. There was even avalanche danger when we were there. So I wouldn't recommend going there in the off season. So this is where you start from. This is Queenstown on the South Island. And this is from a high point in the town, looking down on Queenstown. As I said, this is a center for outdoor activities, bungee jumping, which was invented in New Zealand, whitewater rafting, jet boating, hiking, all that stuff, skiing as well. And there's not a lot of snow in this picture. The mountains in the background are called the Remarkables, and they featured in the movie Lord of the Rings. And so this is day one, taking off on the boat for the start of the Milford Track. And so the lady in the foreground has a pack on, which was provided by, you can bring your own pack, but they'll provide their own blue packs for everybody. So I didn't bring any stuff with me other than my clothes. And they gave me a pack and it was all set. So we got on the boat with all the other independent hikers and all the guided walkers, which would be about 90, because that's the maximum they'll allow per day. And one boat goes across the lake for it's about an hour ride up the lake to the beginning of the track. And then you get there, you make a short walk, level walk up to the first hut, which is called Glade House, which is, I think, pretty old, one of the first huts that was built on the Milford Track, probably back in the 1930s or something like that. And it's very homey inside. They have a nice wood stove going, although it really wasn't that cold when we were there. Only the first morning it was a bit frosty, but they never had a fire going or anything like that. And so the meals were provided. You didn't have to wash dishes or anything. You sat down, they fed you, and that was it. So I like that. That's my kind of hiking. Well, I mean, I've done it all. I've done all kinds of hiking, but I really could get into this kind of hiking. I scanned this picture. We did a group shot of our group, which was, I think, 35 or so people. I don't think we're maxed out, but it really was a cross spectrum of people from around the world, Americans, Canadians, Australians, Europeans, Japanese, young and old. And I think there were a number of people who are well in their 60s and probably 70s doing the trip. So, yeah, it's fairly accessible to a lot of different people. You see, there's a lot of people, so it's not like, and the guys with the red on, they're the guides. It's not like you travel in a big bunch together. So when you start, they say, well, you can start, say, between 8 and 9. So people trickle out, and you got 10 miles of trail that you're going to go in, so you can really spread out. You pretty much have the place to yourself. There's not people coming the opposite direction or anything. So and the guides kind of space themselves out. So if you want to walk with a guide and learn about stuff, they're there to help you. But if you don't want to have anything to do with them, you do it yourself. This is me having a glass of brandy or something the night before the big hike. And just to show the room, the accommodation was, fairly basic, but it wasn't really, it wasn't like the bunk beds and the huts in New Hampshire. It was pretty nice. And if you can get private rooms too if you want to. So this is a traditional start to every morning. We'd have breakfast and then make our lunch. So they put out bread and cheese and stuff. So you made your own. Packed your own lunch, and they provided all the food. And you stuck it in your pack, and you went off that way. And so this is the Clinton River. This is the first day, basically follows this river. It's your friend for about a day and a half. You're following up this river, up this river valley. Beautiful clear water, just spectacular. Fish in there, big, trout like that. They're just swimming around. And you could actually drink the water. They had no prohibitions about drinking the water. Nobody got sick. And this is the first suspension bridge across the river. And we kept going back and forth. We went over this bridge and other bridges a million times. And so keeping going up the river heading up into the mountains and the mountain pass that we later went over. And here is my friend Doug. You'll see lots of pictures of Doug because he didn't take pictures of me so much. I took pictures of him. And that's Claude, the guide, who was exceedingly knowledgeable. And we hiked along with her for a while. So she's explaining, I don't know exactly what she's explaining, but she was very knowledgeable. And she's also having her lunch. And, the New Zealanders are very, they'd say they're more English than the English. And so they had additional huts along the way to provide morning tea. So we stopped and we had morning tea and biscuits and chatted with the other hikers who happened to be there and then went on our way. Again, another picture of Doug. Another picture of Doug crossing yet another bridge on the way up. And this is then coming up to the second hut called Pompolona. Pompolona, yes, it's an Italian origin, I guess. I don't know why. And so we walk in, and there's somebody there greeting you with biscuits and slices of orange, and it's like, wow, this is hiking. And so this is the view from our room, and this is looking up to McKinnon Pass, which is the high mountain pass that we went over the next day. And they provided, the facilities there were very nice. So another ritual every day was washing out your clothes. And they had running water. There were, flushing toilets, showers. And so these Japanese ladies were doing their wash, and I took their picture. They also had some nice drying rooms. So if your boots happened to get wet, which they would if you had a lot of rain, which they do have a lot of rain, they have drying rooms which are very efficient at drying out your clothes. This guy was on on a rail outside our room. This is a Kia, and it's the world's only alpine parrot. And these guys are really aggressive about getting into food. So and into your stuff. So in the doors into the rooms you had to put your hand in and then go around and unlatch it, because these guys could figure out how to get in there. So you had to watch out for the Kias. So here's a picture from the beginning of day 3. Now we're starting to go up, and looking back, the sun is coming up, and shadows still on the trail. And we're actually getting a little bit of altitude now. But the trail was still pretty easy. There's maybe a bit rocky in places, but it was fine. And then this is continuing up, and this is where it got very exhilarating, because you're coming above timberline. And these beautiful flowers along the trail on both sides. And then this formation, these mountains in the distance, are called the Nicholas Cirque. And I had the feeling like this was like the sound of music or something. It was just this exhilaration from getting up in this beautiful scenery and the flowers and everything. It was just amazing. This is some of the mountain buttercups. Took a picture of those. And then you achieved the top of that pass, which I pointed out. This is McKinnon Pass. It's 3,800 feet. Really not that high. If you're hiking in the White Mountains, you're doing 4,000, 6,000 feet. So it's not terribly high. But this isn't the highest place in New Zealand, but this is just a mountain pass. So, and there's a cairn there to mark the spot. And then some fabulous views from McKinnon Pass. And I couldn't find the name. I can't remember the name of this mountain, but it really was pretty, reflected in the lake there. And here's Doug. He's got a red shirt on today. This is the McKinnon Pass hut where we had lunch that day. And looking back at the Nicholas Cirque, which was in my previous slide. And then this is looking down into the valley that we're going into, the valley of the Arthur River. And you can see down here at the bottom is where the next hut we're going down to. So it's way down there. Like, holy smokes, I got to go down there. And I think that's maybe a landing strip for airplane, but we didn't see any airplanes down there. And this is the Southern Alps, the mountains in the distance, glaciers and all that. And here so we start going down into the valley. There's Doug with his red shirt, looking up at the mountains. And again, they made it very easy for you. So we're going down this mountain stream with waterfalls, and it was pretty gnarly, but they built these nice steps and boardwalk all the way down. So it wasn't hard. Anybody could do it. Not hard at all. And this waterfall was spectacular. This is from that boardwalk, looking down, turquoise water. You just wanted to jump right in. And then you descend down into this, it gets moister and moister as you get nearer the coast. And you get into this underworld, this kind of spooky underworld of moss and ferns, and it was fortunately it was clear out and sunny, so it wasn't as spooky as it could have been. This is we saw these along the way. These are traps for the stoats, which are kind of weasel, and they were introduced to New Zealand to control rabbits, which themselves were not native to New Zealand. And they become a pest, and they're very much a pest to the native wildlife, the birds. A lot of flightless birds in New Zealand, because New Zealand sort of, it doesn't have snakes, it doesn't have carnivores or natural carnivores, so all the animals there are pretty tame. So the stoats are nasty, and they take some of the more exotic birds like the kiwis and the takas, and I forget all the different bird names, but so that we saw a lot of these stoat traps. Didn't see any stoats though, or even any dead ones, I don't think. So I didn't take this picture myself. This is an aerial picture of Sutherland Falls, the highest waterfall in New Zealand, one of the highest waterfalls in the world actually, about 1,900 feet, and it comes off the lip of that lake at the top there. And so one of the features of the Milford track is it's about a mile side trip into the base of Sutherland Falls. And we hiked into the falls there, crashing down on us, and Doug went down to the bottom and posed for me. But it really was amazing. And so after Sutherland Falls, we got to the next hut, the last hut on the Milford Track, the Quinton Hut. Another cozy place. Again, the huts on the Milford Track were relatively old, but still well kept. And this is a helicopter that had arrived when we were there, bringing in supplies. So unlike the huts in the White Mountains, where you have guys that have to hike all the stuff up to the huts and supply them, they cheat here. It is very remote, so they use helicopters. And so that's why they can bring in, all kinds of stuff, propane gas, for heating, and, they have that's why all the amenities are there, because they supply them by air. And in fact, one of the most important amenities they supply is a bar. So we hung out at the bar with this Australian lady and the two guides, and there's Doug again. He's got a white shirt on this time. Okay, so this is the last day on the Milford Track, which is it's 13 miles, but it was, pretty much like this, very smooth, easy walking. Again, super lush here at the end of the track, beautiful. And here's some more ferns. This is looking out at the Arthur River. You can just see it there on the right. And maybe another waterfall over there in the distance. So the Milford Track is actually most famous for its waterfalls. There's lots of them. I don't have all the pictures of all of them. Anyway, this is one of the most famous waterfalls on the Milford Track. This is the Mackay Falls, I believe. It's a series of falls, and just spectacular. I know what I was going to say. They definitely manage their expectations of people who do the Milford Track, because they tell you, expect it to rain. And so the most spectacular thing about the Milford Track are the waterfalls. And of course, for good waterfalls, you got to have rain. So they manage that expectation. So if you go and it's raining, you can expect to see good waterfalls. And finally, this is hiking out toward Milford Sound. There's Doug heading off down toward the water, the mountains towering overhead. And then that's me finishing up at Sandfly Point, the end of the Milford Track. I've done 33.5 miles. By the way, they use kilometers in New Zealand, but on the Milford Track they use miles, and they have mile markers every mile. So that's just a carryover from the old days before they went metric. So I made it that far, and then we had a boat waiting for us on Milford Sound, and we got on the boat, and we realized why it was called Sandfly Point. It was pretty nasty. As you get down close to the water there, the flies were just terrible. And there were some other guys on our trip who then did a kayaking trip on Milford Sound, and they had a horrible time because they got ate up by the sandflies. So I'm glad I didn't do that. We instead went and did the Routeburn Track, which is the next part of my talk. And so after we went to a motel in Milford, the town of Milford, and everybody got their award, and I gave us a little speech, just like everybody else. And then the part of the package was a cruise on Milford Sound. Fortunately, this was the day we was not very good weather. It was kind of overcast, but very kind of moody, but not as spectacular as it could be in nice weather, like this picture I got off the internet. This is a picture of Milford Sound in nice weather with Mitre Peak, that pointy peak right there that sticks up about 5,000 feet above the ocean. This is the ocean here in the fjord. And this is being a fjord, this thing is exceedingly deep. It's a couple of thousand feet deep. And so it's a huge, it's a sunken glacial valley. All right, so that's the Milford Track. Here's a little bit about background on the Routeburn Track, which isn't as famous as the Milford Track, but I think deserves to be because it's absolutely spectacular. It is, again, same season, November to April, 3 days, 2 nights. It's shorter. It's 20 miles only. The guided walk is, again, only one way, and there are optional hikes that you can, side hikes you can take. We did the Key Summit hike, but the Conical Hill one was closed because of avalanche danger, so we didn't get to do Conical Hill. And you can see the days on the Routeburn track are relatively short compared to the Milford track, but it is more, it's more rugged, so there's a lot, it's more up and down than the Milford track is. You can do it as an independent walker, and this trail you can do both directions. It's less regulated than the Milford track. And again, they have Department of Conservation huts for the independent walkers on the Routeburn track. So the Routeburn track doesn't mess around. So you take off, you start at the road and you go up immediately. And you get to a place called Key Summit, which fortunately this day was not a great, didn't start as a great day anyway, and kind of overcast. But this is, I've seen the pictures of this place when it's nice. It's really spectacular. Everybody says how Key Summit is so beautiful. You can actually do this as a day trip. If you're in New Zealand, you just want to go for a nice walk, you can just go hike Key Summit and go back down. You don't have to do the whole Routeburn track. And so this day we hiked along and my camera was getting wet because it was started raining on us. I was like, oh crap, this is going to be, this is the famous wet weather they talk about in southern New Zealand. And so, but again, Moss City everywhere. There was a little bit of slipping around. And then, the mountains are obscured, but it's kind of, still pretty, with moody with the clouds coming up out of the valley. And then we look back and we could see Fiordland Falls, which is the highest waterfall on the Routeburn track. There aren't as many waterfalls on the Routeburn, but this one is pretty spectacular. And we actually hiked to the base of that and then walked out and then looked back on it. And then we approached our first hut, which is called the Lake Mackenzie hut, because it's called on Lake Mackenzie. You'll notice there's a lot of Scottish names down there in the South Island, New Zealand. There's obviously a lot of Scots went there. This is the Lake Mackenzie hut, and this is a brand, at least then, brand new hut. It was beautiful, very, very nice. And we relaxed inside, and you got the mountains in the distance, and we played chess or whatever, and hung out, had a beer. And this is the dining area, very airy, very nice. This is very pleasant. The group that we were with on the Routeburn track was less. There were probably only about 20 of us, so it was a quieter group. And then in the evening that same day, it cleared up, and so we walked up to Lake Mackenzie to get this beautiful shot of the mountains in the twilight, reflected in the calm water. Then the next day we wake up and we go up to Lake Mackenzie, and we have a beautiful day. And it turns out, of all the days you wanted to be beautiful, this was the day to do it, and we hit it right on hit the nail on the head here. And so this is Lake Mackenzie in the foreground, and I forget the name of the mountains in the background. But they featured for the next few hours as we hiked up and up. And so this is going up, looking down on Lake Mackenzie. The hut would be over there on the right somewhere. And then, again, another shot of Lake Mackenzie in the lower right-hand corner, looking up at those mountains you saw earlier. And then this brings you up to a place called Ocean Peak Corner, which is one of the most spectacular viewpoints on the Routeburn track. And there's low cloud in the valley here, but if there wasn't there, you could actually see the Tasman Sea out there, which is the ocean between New Zealand and Australia. I don't think you could see Australia, but you could see the ocean if those clouds weren't there. But they were, and I didn't see them. This is just a picture of a couple of people. This is one of the guides clowning around. The guides were they were fun people, and I can see how, they hired them to be good people interacting with their clients. And one of the ladies who was in our group. So we hiked along. We got above timberline, and the Routeburn track then follows basically the side of the mountain. You can see it snaking along the side of this mountain for quite a ways, maybe a couple of miles or more. You're going along and you're looking out at this wonderful view the whole way at the Darren Mountains there. We basically hiked for that 3 or 4 miles along that face, looking out at the mountains. And these mountains are about 9,000 feet high. Not hugely high by world standards. But again, since New Zealand's fairly far south and it's cold, they tend to be covered in snow year round. The other thing is, and they're only 9,000 feet high, but these are sticking basically right out of the ocean, because the ocean is right there. And so there's they're quite dramatic as a result of that. So this is the high point on the Routeburn Track, Harris Saddle, and there's a emergency shelter there where we had lunch. And here you're at about 4,300 feet high. So this is, again, not particularly high by world standards or even by White Mountain standards. And this is me, one of the few pictures of me. This is actually one of my favorite places. This was Lake Harris near the Harris Saddle. And this is a little bit slightly scary, because you're walking along the trail there and there's a huge cliff that goes down to the water to the lake there. But it's just a beautiful spot. So I had my friend take my picture there. And then we started going down. That lake there feeds into a stream that goes down into the valley. And just beautiful, again, beautiful, crystal clear, cold water. And the guide decided to go swimming. And I had to join her. So that was exhilarating. That woke me up. And some beautiful, I don't know what kind of flowers these were. These were covering the whole side of a boulder on the way down from the mountain. And that brought us to the last hut of the whole trip, the Routeburn Falls hut. Again, this was a brand new hut, just built for the Routeburn. A nice facility there. Actually, for this hut, my friend and I dragged our mattresses out onto the deck and slept out under the stars. And this is the view we had before the sun went down from the deck, looking down. And that's an independent walker hut down below us. We were the first class hikers. And then last day on the Routeburn Track, going down into the valley. And this river here is called the Routeburn. And burn is Scottish for like stream or river. So that's why it's called the Routeburn Track. So then you go down to the valley and then you follow the Routeburn all the way out to the road. And this was kind of sad, because this is the last suspension bridge of the whole trip. We'd done many of these. It was always fun to go over these beautiful roaring streams. And I forgot her name, because she was the one I went swimming with. Anyway, she was following behind me. And this is our picture at the end of the Routeburn Track. And the folks, so it's Doug and myself, and then this couple here were the only couple that had done the Milford Track and the Routeburn Track. So we were the only 4 people that had done the whole thing. Some people did just the Routeburn, some people did just the Milford, but so we became friends with them. Actually came and saw me a couple of months ago here in Connecticut. So no picture of New Zealand is complete without a picture of sheep. So we got on the bus, picked us up, took us back to Queenstown, and I snapped this picture from the bus looking out, because, again, no slideshow on New Zealand is complete without a picture of sheep. And they're everywhere, as well as mountains. And then here we are back in Queenstown. Again, another shot looking out on the lake. Gosh, I can't remember the name of the lake. It starts with W. Anybody remember? Anyway, we took a steamboat out on the lake down to a town on the other end. That was really spectacular. I don't have any pictures from that here, but there's lots to do in Queenstown. It's a must-see place on any itinerary in New Zealand. And then this is my final slide, just summarizing these 2 trails if anybody's thinking about doing it. And actually there's a lot of discussion, like on the internet, travel boards about should I do the Routeburn, should I do the Milford. You know, they're slightly different. One is longer than the other. The Milford is longer. There's a lot of more valley walking on the Milford track, as you can see in the pictures. You're down along the streams more, and there's one day where you go over the mountain pass. Whereas on the Routeburn, you're spending a higher percentage of your time above timberline, as you saw in those pictures. And the Routeburn is more rugged, I would say, you know, but it's still not hard. The Routeburn tends to be drier. It's not as wet as, it doesn't get as much moisture as the Milford track does. It's a little bit further away from the ocean. And the Routeburn can be hiked in both directions. And of course, the Milford is famous for its waterfalls. Lots of them, it's beautiful. And you can only hike it in one direction. So I kind of like to go back. There's other trails to do in New Zealand. They're called the Great Walks of New Zealand. There's the Kepler track, there's the Greenstone track, there's a number of other tracks you can do. As far as I know, the Milford and the Routeburn are the most developed in terms of providing the guided walks and a nice accommodation. Like the Kepler track, is spectacular, I know, but I think it's more an independent walker situation where you bring your own stuff, your sleeping bag and all that. So it's less catered for from an international traveler perspective. Thank you for your attention.